The Legend of Zelda, despite being called The Legend of Zelda, is not you playing as Princess Zelda, but rather us saving Zelda as Link. At least in the Zelda games where Zelda is present. Whew, that is a lot of Zelda at the beginning of this Zelda video about Princess Zelda possibly being playable in the sequel to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. But Conrad, you already made a video like this in 2020, but not about Zelda being a companion that might be playable in 3 ways, just as an AI companion, as the player too, or playable by switching to her, much like Bowser Jr. in Bowser's Fury. Hence, I will be talking about the most adventurous Princess Zelda to date and the many ways the Zelda team can turn her and with it the sequel to being even better than the original. But first, be sure to leave a like, and if you're new and have not subscribed, then press that red subscribe button with notification bell, and again with all notifications on. All completely for free to not miss our upcoming Zelda and Nintendo videos. But now, let's get into our 3 playable possibilities for short-haired Zelda, and we begin with AI Companion. Throughout the 3D Zelda games, the Minish Cap and the 2DS games, Nintendo has granted us companions that followed us throughout our adventure. We had fairies, a talking boat, a talking hat, a cursed princess, a cowardly captain, the spirit of Princess Zelda, and the spirit of the Master Sword. Now, we might be on the verge of getting another companion princess with us, this time of proper Hyrule, who is on a personal quest to avenge her fallen kingdom and all those who lost their lives 100 years ago. As Zelda, by shortening her golden locks, has in many ways changed and is ready to not only be followed by Link, but be there for Link through it all. Well, unless she's kidnapped by Ganondorf here, which I really hope will not happen until at worst late in the game. Make us love adventuring with Zelda, as there's no greater way to appreciate or motivation to take something back than what is taken for granted and then taken away. Breath of the Wild was the game where we grew as Link. The sequel should be a title where we grow together as a pair who share the same meals, ride next to each other on horseback, and simply do things together, like fighting, fishing, and even solving puzzles. Naturally, in the past, AI companions were not able to complete these kinds of complicated tasks, and Nintendo solved the limitations by often leaving behind naturally and less naturally our companions behind, and then granted far more action to the companions in cutscenes or bound linear sections of the game. It is just that in recent years, companion AI has become far more sophisticated and less dependent on commands from, say, Link. And this includes Nintendo with the Zelda team, which have greatly improved their AI companions in the last 5 years. And it is thanks to 3 Switch games: Breath of the Wild through the Wolf Link amiibo functionality, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 with Pyra and Mithra aiding Rex, and most recently, Bowser's Fury. Naturally, all of these are examples that the Zelda team has likely been able to take advantage from, as they created their amiibo companion who can attack enemies and also find collectibles. Monolith Soft in the way that the Zelda team has been working with them since the development of Breath of the Wild and now with the sequel, and the Mario team's AI that can be brought over and evolve for Breath of the Wild sequel. This goes in particular for enhancing the AI of Bowser Jr. in Bowser's Fury, who could be used in 3 ways: as a passive AI companion who just followed us, as an active AI companion who helps us defeat opponents, aka his furious father's allies, and finally as a playable companion for a second player sitting next to us. In other words, Bowser's Fury is the reason why I'm making this video, as it has shown the way of how it could be done in Zelda, more specifically with short-haired Princess Zelda. As a sophisticated though passive AI who follows us around the open air, as an active AI companion who we can just adjust to be so in the beginning of the game, as a playable player 2 character, or even better, played as a companion or extra party member which we can switch to at any time, like in Final Fantasy VII Remake when in combat or puzzle situations. Oh, and obviously Hyrule Warriors, Age of Calamity. Or much like we did with the command melody with 2 other companions in the Wind Waker, Medley and Makar. Specifically when we cleared the late Earth and Wind temples, as both had the ability to reach places that Link couldn't, and also aid us as a second character within the respective temple. The one of these was clearly superior to the other. Medley. In other words, a true potential game changer for the Zelda franchise, but which, much like in Bowser's Fury, is not forced upon you, instead being optional in most situations, outside of when it is required, like say to solve puzzles, or in some dungeons, like in the case of Medley and Makar, as Zelda can either just be there with us or participate. it, leaving the choice up to us and also granting amazing replayability that is even better than the one found in Breath of the Wild, as we can replay the game in multiple different gameplay styles. The possibilities are definitely there, so let's get into examples of how Zelda could work this way. As a companion alone, she'll not be doing much unless we talk to her at the next cutscene. Being a non-playable companion alone grants great plot, character, and relation development opportunities. We have seen this with past companions like Midna in Twilight Princess, and for many, this may be enough. But having Zelda standing passive next to us, say fixing her hair while we slay enemies right next to her, might not be as exciting for others, who may want to have her take active part by activating the full potential of a sophisticated active companion AI, one that kicks ass and is helpful when we want her to be helpful. Once again, going into the menu, and much like we could turn on or off Pro HUD mode and aim with motion controls in Breath of the Wild, could maybe turn Zelda to either being passive or active when facing enemies, or at least being just active in some situations, like how we could use Midna to attack enemies while being in the form of Wolf-Link. Well, that and using the right or left D-pad to easily switch playing as Zelda when you want it. It is just that Breath of the Wild already utilized the D-pad pretty much fully, so we'll just have to see how that goes. Though it is possible that the up D-pad button may be freed up, as Sheik Attack might not work in the sequel, but Link's arm seems to be a natural candidate to replace the functionality of this one, if it can morph into different tools and weapons as seen in the scrapped concept. In fact, the only button that was not utilized directly at any time in gameplay was the A button, which was used for action commands like picking up weapons, opening chests, climbing down, etc. So switching to playable Zelda without going through a selection screen could be a challenge unless she's mapped to be a multi-button command, like shield surfing was in Breath of the Wild. ZL followed by X for jumping, and quickly A mid-air to actually jump on the shield, or the paraglider by jumping off a height and then pressing X again. Alternatively, if the button mapping cannot be solved, or by allocating say Zelda to say an A plus B command, or even the menu, then she might only be played as a second player companion, much like Bowser Jr. was aiding Mario in Bowser's Fury. We should also not forget that the only way to not drastically change the entire game with a playable Zelda companion is by making her optional, which was the key to the success of Bowser Jr. and his AI in Bowser's Fury. It didn't have to be intrusive, and the same should be the case with Princess Zelda, if she's more than a damsel or regular companion in the sequel. This way, much like with Breath of the Wild, we'll have multiple opportunities to decide for ourselves how we want to play our first holy playthrough of the game. Zelda Breath of the Wild sequel with Princess Zelda my way, much like we were encouraged to play and explore the land of Hyrule in our way in Breath of the Wild. That is the best way to make Zelda an active part of the Breath of the Wild sequel, not forcing us to play as her upon our heads, outside of say certain situations where it will take two, much like to dance tango you need a partner. Random example, but who wouldn't love to play as Link dancing with Zelda in the sequel, along with cooking, camping, riding, climbing, and so much more that can truly bring out the full potential that has been hidden within the princesses through 35 plus years of the Zelda franchise. Please, producer Eiji Aonuma and director Hidemaru Fujibayashi, don't take away Zelda in the beginning of the game and turn her into a damsel again. She already had that role in Breath of the Wild, and we freed her from that horrible century. Instead, continue breaking established conventions by removing outdated tropes. In this case, none of them is more outdated than Princess Zelda as the damsel in the castle. And no, don't make Link the damsel instead this time, as Zelda the only playable character for most of the game. Instead, let this be Link and Zelda's adventure, a quest of discovery and naturally hunt after Ganondorf. One where we can adjust how much we want to involve and take control of Princess Zelda, and then ultimately make the two a part of the final battle against Ganondorf. Nothing else needs to be said. I've made my point clear, and now we just have to wait and see what the Zelda team will deliver. Meanwhile, I would love to hear your respectful thoughts in the comment section down below about the options that we could see for Princess Zelda in Breath of the Wild sequel. leave a like on this video and share it so more people can watch it. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel by pressing the red button and with notification bell, and again for all notifications to not miss any of our upcoming Breath of the Wild 2, Zelda and Nintendo videos. Finally, a big thanks goes to all our patreon.com/commonrealm patrons, and in particular our royal producer Charles Shash. And all of you watching, please enjoy one or both of these two awesome videos.